Hi, this is Tracy Swedlow, Editor-in-Chief of Interactive TV Today, and this is Radio ITVT. We're very happy to have Dylan Collins today, who is the CEO of SuperAwesome, superawesome.com, which is a kids internet, a kids technology platform, a company. It's all kinds of things, and I'm excited to explore this because we don't normally get to bring these kinds of companies into the event, but we're going to do so more, and very happy to have Dylan here on the show. Dylan, welcome.
Hi, Tracy. Thank you. And I got to say, that is absolutely the best introduction that I've ever had.
Okay. Well, it's an awesome intro. Actually, one of my side things I like to do is to take screenshots of places where people use the word awesome all the time, and so here's a whole company devoted to that. I think it fascinates me, the rise of that word in popular culture.
Yeah, well, what's very funny is that, because we operate sort of around the world in lots of different countries, it's certainly more common in the US, but whenever we come out of meetings, let's say in the UK or in Asia, all of a sudden everyone else who was in the room is suddenly saying awesome and super awesome, like about 10 times more frequently than they ever did before. So it's sort of like we're infecting the English language everywhere we go.
It is. It has become so widespread. I'm wondering if they'll make it like the word of the year from, who does that? Like Webster Dictionary or the Encyclopedia Britannica or something like that. All right. Anyway. You also, from what I understand, are chairman of another company called Totally Awesome, which is a joint venture with a leading VC called Inspire Ventures, which does the same thing you're doing here in the US or in Europe, in Asia. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's right. It's Totally Awesome is probably more better described as a kids digital media company, which uses, I suppose, a lot of the same parts of our business model, the distinction being that SuperAwesome builds all of the actual technology that's being used, whereas Totally Awesome is it runs sort of an ad business, but it also owns content as well. So it's more on the media side. But broadly speaking, they're very much both kind of tracking the same theme, which is the really, really rapid growth of kids, on the internet and kids within the digital media ecosystem, and the need to create very specific platforms and technology and developer tools to support everything that they're doing.
Well, I think it's interesting that you completely focused on what I believe is the under 13 set, and they're here in the U.S. We've heard the term, and we've used it at our own conference, TV of Tomorrow show, where you'll be speaking, by the way, in June, called the plurals. I don't know how they are referred to in Europe or elsewhere, but it's kind of like, the generation, maybe even the younger generation underneath, something in between, of the millennials, right? So the millennials are all in their 30s, right? Late 20s, 30s, and then who are those kids in between 13 and like 25? I don't know if there is a name. And then there's these under 13. Maybe I don't know, but it's obviously. Go ahead.
I think the under 13s, they're being called either the Centennials or I think some people are referring to them now as Generation Alpha. There's a few names kind of floating around to really define this generation of kids who are growing up with direct access to digital devices, not having to sort of learn digital engagement, it literally being a native thing that they do. Many of them from a TV perspective, won't really know of live TV or the concept of live TV programming. Everything is on demand. So they're really, I think quite genuinely, a generation that we've never quite seen before.
So I think you're in a great position to get to know their interests, and to deliver content to them. And let's go into an understanding of what it is that you offer. I believe you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 products or so, or one of which is more just a sort of certification. But you have basically an ad platform and ad network, content tools. I'm talking for you, but why don't you give us a sense of exactly what you're offering advertisers, brands, and
Sure.
for publishers, please.
Sure.
And,
So
and
I
why?
mean, I suppose,
Yeah. No, you
first
already
of
answered
all,
why. But,
yeah,
go ahead.
we build, what's commonly described as kid tech, which is, very specific technology that's built for the needs of the under 13 audience. So everything that we built is designed for compliance with all of the data privacy laws, in the kids sector, and that laws like COPPA in the US, laws like GDPR-K in Europe. They're built to really make sure that no data is ever being captured on kids. From an actual product perspective, we have, I suppose, a set of solutions within our cloud which are used by advertisers and brands and content owners and media companies as they start to build out more and more digital engagement with kids. So, that starts with, and you gave a very good list there, our AwesomeAds platform, which is a kid-safe ad solution. So that provides reach solutions for brands. It provides kid-safe ad monetization for content owners. We have a social platform, which provides, again, social functionality and social tools for all of
Called
those companies that are engaging. Exactly.
PopJam.
With children under 13, and then we have a set of I suppose deeper tools called Kids Web Services, which provides a lot of different functionality for companies that are building apps and consumer services for kids, that again sort of deal with all of the data privacy requirements. So when you have companies, and it's brands or it's content owners, who are building games for kids or service platforms or content platforms, when they want to build things like authentication and registration and tools for the actual parents so that parents can see what their kids are doing, they're able to kind of plug into all of these things. So basically, as companies get more sophisticated in terms of what they are doing digitally with their kids' audience, they're able to tap into all of our products and solutions to actually give them more support and enabling them to build out their own ecosystem. And we do that across the world now with about 250 customers. And they're across like a wide range of industries. So from the likes of studios and film to toy companies, book publishers, video games. I think more and more as people are realizing that kids have become this huge force on the internet and everywhere generally, people are realizing that they have to have, some sort of specific support for kids to be able to engage with their services.
Well, I know that you said 250 clients, but does that include are those the big brands and the studios and things, or all over the world, or do you include all these YouTube bloggers that you make relationships with in order to certify them as a safe family through your Safe Fam certification program? Who are your customers?
That would exclude anything that goes on the YouTuber side. So all the customers that I'm talking about are all those various companies and developers and publishers and content owners. The YouTube side of our business is actually quite recent, because as companies have been extending their reach to kids in some sort of digital setting, they're all running into the challenge of, kids are spending a lot of time on YouTube, but the challenge is that YouTube is an adult platform. It was never built for kids. So a huge amount of our customers have been saying, kind of challenging us, look, we're using all of your products everywhere else. Can you help us, make our kids' engagement on YouTube safer? So we've started rolling out a couple of products there around YouTube media buying, and we recently announced, which is what you were talking about, our YouTuber content certification, which is an actual certification standard for YouTubers, for YouTube influencers who have young audiences, so that they know, the standards and sort of the benchmarks and the principles that they should be maintaining when they're creating content on YouTube that is likely to get viewed or consumed by under 13s.
And that's called Safe Fam, but is that something you offer, or is that something that YouTube offers?
No, that's specifically something that we offer. So again, YouTube, doesn't have any under 13 registration. that it is an adult platform. But again, the reality is that there are a huge number of kids who are using it, right, to
Right,
consume
right.
content there. So it's not something that YouTube can do. It is very specifically something we can do as a third party, because again, we've got a huge amount of content data outside of YouTube in terms of what kids are doing and using and viewing and engaging, and we're the biggest sort of kid tech player. So all of the brands, many of the brands and content owners are coming to us, asking us, generally speaking, what should the standards be for for kids engagement across lots of different media. So because there were no standards, YouTube couldn't put standards in place. Their hands were tied really when it came to YouTube and under 13s. We decided to step in, again, because so many of our clients were asking us to. So, it was actually like the reaction we got was pretty overwhelming from the YouTube community, because when we went to YouTube and said, hey guys, this is what we're thinking about doing and this is why, they all sort of said, look, this is amazing. We really want this. They wanted to go through certification because, all of the YouTubers, the serious influencers, they do really care about their audience and they do want to demonstrate that they are doing the right thing and they are being good citizens. So I think we announced SafeFam with, I think it was close to about 20 YouTubers and about, 10 or 15 million subscribers. I think SafeFam certification is now close to 75 YouTubers and channels with close to 50 or 60 million subscribers. And I mean, that's in the tens of billions of video views at this point.
And that doesn't even include what you claim to be your network of 500 million views a month. Is that views or?
So that's sort of users. So let me sort of
users. That's not even. Yeah, that's users.
Yeah, let me dedupe the numbers for you. So our overall, if you look at all of our products, which I talked about, right, which is what we call the SuperAwesome Cloud, that reaches about, at this point, over about half a billion kids every month, in terms of all the content and applications and companies that are using it to actually engage with kids. So it's kind of an aggregate reach. Our ad platform, which is one of the solutions within there, reaches somewhere north of about 400 million unique kids every month around the world. So we are by far the biggest platform in the world in terms of reach and engagement. And again, I suppose we're doing that because we have got many, many solutions there, for advertisers certainly, but also for those content owners, because the problems they have are not just about advertising. The problems are around social. The problems are around functionality, because no one had invested in the kid tech ecosystem. No one had invested in building ad tools for developers in the kid space because it was so difficult historically because of the data privacy laws. And that was really why we set the company up, to build out the ecosystem so that it could get bigger and bigger and bigger for everyone.
And I just want to point out an interesting statistic. I mean, you say you're reaching about 500 million kids around the world. I looked it up, and there are currently 1.9 billion children in the world, which is basically 27% of the world population. So you're reaching, I can't do the math, but like 25% of that. What's that? Yeah.
That's about, and probably and certainly growing each day. Although when you give me that stat, it just makes me realize we've got a lot more work to do.
A lot more opportunity.
To get to all those kids. But it's amazing. Like when you sort of look back at we started the company about 4.5 years ago, and at the time, kids were just not seen as being part of the internet, part of the digital ecosystem. And the approach that developers and companies in general would take is they would have a tick box on the app or service, and it was a tick box saying, yes, I'm over 13. And that was their whole strategy for kids, right? And that has just completely changed as, people realize that kids are using absolutely everything from an incredibly young age, and you can't just allow them to be operating within an adult environment. And really, that was the thing that's driven all of these new data privacy laws like COPPA in the US and GDPR in Europe, in terms of putting in place very specific, restrictions on data privacy and data gathering around them, which really sort of was the thing that sort of catalyzed the entire kid tech sector.
For everyone who's listening, if you do go on their site, which is superawesome.tv, you'll see the acronyms all over the place, which Dylan just referred to, called COPPA and GDPR. COPPA stands for Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, which was put into place in 2000 in the US, and it's administered by the FTC. And GDPR is General Data Protection Regulation, which is a European-based regulation. I guess that was put into place in 2016, so it's fairly recent-ish.
It is, yeah, it is. It actually goes into legal effect in May this year, and actually the kids part of that, the kids part of GDPR is called GDPR-K for kids, obviously. And I suppose just as kind of a brief description of what that is for your listeners, broadly speaking, those laws state that you cannot capture any personal identifiable information on kids, which means no cookies, no trackers, which means, from let's say an advertising perspective, that means no behavioral targeting, no retargeting, which essentially means that, like, you think of the entire MarTech sector and the entire ad tech sector, and they can't operate in the under 13 space because they're all their solutions and business models are based around personal data.
I mean, data is, the new black, right? Data is gold.
Right.
It's real currency. And of course, a lot of the people who attend and participate at our conference are, they want data. They want to sell you data. They want to manage it, track it, so on and so forth. So I think it's going to be interesting to find out how you're able to deliver what you can, without all of that, but what kind of data you are collecting. And I know you used terms on your site called contextual advertising and content matching algorithms. So can you kind of explain how you are able to deliver the ads to the right place that are safe, to the right kids or right pages? And are you delivering this to Facebook? Of course, Facebook's in the news these days. How are you able to deliver all that in an intelligent way without extracting people's personal data through cookies?
Sure. So all of our technology, we've built, the biggest kid tech team, the biggest kid tech engineering team in the world. So it's bigger than anything that's been done at Google or anything that's been done at Facebook in the family space. So all of our technology on the advertising side is analyzing the content only. So it's never looking at the user, it's never looking at the profile. It's analyzing and understanding the content of all of our kids publishers that are in our marketplace. And it's then looking at the ad itself, and it's matching the ad with the content in an entirely contextual way based on what makes sense. So there's a lot of machine learning that's going on behind the scenes. The best way of thinking about it is almost as if it's a kid's content search engine behind the scenes that's looking at the content and making the best decision in terms of what ad to put with what piece of content at what time. And obviously doing that at absolutely huge scale. And as well as that kind of core concept, then we've also invested in building out solutions around programmatic and solutions around CPI and solutions around attribution, which are very difficult things to do when you consider that you can't use personal data to do them. So we've really, quite genuinely built an entire ecosystem here single-handedly for all of these brands to do a version of what they were doing in the adult space, but in a completely safe and sort of privacy-centric way in the kids market.
Well, what if a kid, wants to talk about their health? They want to talk about, things that might be uncomfortable for a 5-year-old, but a 13-year-old might be interested in, discussing puberty or whatever it is, because I know that it's controversial about various algorithms out there that might block out certain keywords that refer to body parts or controversial topics. I mean, how do you handle those kinds of edges of your universe? You know what I mean? Like, how can you still deliver a safe experience but still
Right. So we have, it really depends on the product, right? So if you look at our ad platform, in terms of all the publishers that are permitted into that marketplace, they all go through a very strict screening and review process before they are allowed into our marketplace. So it's very much like there's a set of entry criteria. It's constantly being reviewed. Most companies or publishers who apply to get into our marketplace aren't allowed in there. in terms of content creation, and you see this mostly with our social platform with TopJam, we have both moderation technology and full-time moderation teams that are actually part of those products. So when kids are creating content, it's all going through these same filters before any content is actually being approved for release on any of the actual channels. So there's a lot of sort of infrastructure that's there to make sure that the ecosystem is a completely safe and completely appropriate place. And I mean, even right down to every single ad that comes through or gets served through our technology. I mean, of course, it's the data privacy compliance is covered by virtue of the actual technology, but we actually do human review on every ad creative as well to make sure that it's compliant with ad standards on a country by country basis. So, for example, Karu in the US. So there'll be things like wording, imagery, etc. So there's a huge amount of sort of diligence and oversight that goes into every element of anything that looks like content that happens within our ecosystem.
Do you get a set of policies or things that are acceptable, or words that are acceptable or not acceptable from each of the countries that you deliver the ads to?
Yes.
And then
so on the advertising side, you have standards that are set country by country in terms of content and what's appropriate and what isn't. It tends to be defined by different groups. Sometimes it's advertising associations, sometimes it's government based. So, for example, religious imagery, specific words, any exhortation to buy. So you can't have specific wording that's going to pressure a child into doing something. So there's a lot of different standards that are there, really across the globe. And one of the reasons that I suppose we've been growing so quickly is that it's very, very difficult for any company to try and build our entire focus and our entire team in-house, because you're constantly dealing with standards that are changing and shifting. Certainly not weekly, but definitely monthly. And that could be on the data privacy law, like, for example, in Europe. It could be on new standards that are being set. So when you're using the SuperAwesome Cloud, everything on the back end is kind of being constantly updated and worked on to reflect the latest changes in whatever requirements that are there in terms of be it wording or data privacy law or whatever.
One thing I wanted to point out, which I should have done at the beginning, is this is a cross-platform experience for kids. This is not even, linear television, really. It's all on demand, interactive on every device, correct?
Yeah. Our technology supports basically everything that you can possibly imagine at this point. Including obviously OTT and VOD. But yeah, kids, one of the great challenges for everyone is that kids are not single device consumers. They use content. They almost don't even see the hardware, right? They are hardware agnostic. What they're interested in is going through lots of different content. So it's not uncommon at all that you will see a child sort of skip from consuming content on a tablet to on a smartphone to perhaps some sort of laptop or desktop and then back again.
Also, people have always you've always heard criticism that when kids watch regular television, linear television, they're exposed to all sorts of toy ads and things that, drive them to want, to ask their parents to buy them all of this stuff. And, to what extent, is that still part of this experience? Or, what kinds of ads do you deliver? And then I guess the other end of the spectrum of that question, I'm sort of throwing it all at you at once, is the goal of advertising is to get you to click somewhere else, to get you to click to buy somewhere else. So how do you handle, the brand's need for ROI, right? Commerce, do you manage transactions? What's that whole story?
Well, really within the kid space, again, this is where, you see it as really being very different from the adult space, because the key currency and the key conversion metric in the kid space is fundamentally engagement and time rather than a literal purchase. Because again, kids are typically not making the purchase themselves. again, the data privacy law prevents you, make sure that you're not tracking them, towards some sort of online purchase anyway. So really, brands focus and content owners focus in the kids space is in how do you create great engagement experiences for kids, and how do you send them there and how do you make it exciting for them, and how do you kind of create environments that are fun for kids where they want to spend, minutes of their time or even hours of their time per day to go and explore a brand or to explore a new author or to look at sort of a new movie that's coming out. So you're thinking about a different currency. So rather than, it being about, well, X amount of people purchased Y amount of tickets, it's, well, this audience is now spending, minutes of their time, engaging with a lot of the characters from within this movie. And that in turn gets them excited about it, and makes them want to go and see that particular movie or buy that particular book or play that particular game.
And do you deliver data back to the brands about how these kids are using? I'm assuming you would.
So we have extensive data on how, again, it depends on the product, but just from an advertising perspective, on how the ads are actually being engaged with. So we look at it's never ever collecting user data. You're always looking at, how are the formats working, or what kind of aggregate engagement are you seeing, or if they are using our social tools, what kind of content is being created, how are kids sort of engaging with that particular channel, in content terms. So again, you are looking at a different set when you think about data. You are thinking about it in the kids space, a different kind of thing. And this definitely, or it's one of the reasons why we get very involved in a lot of technical conversations around, ad standards and things like viewability, because a lot of the tools that are there and the standards that are set by the big agencies are set purely with adults in mind and are set under the assumption that you can track a lot of personal information. And of course, those assumptions kind of fall down when you're in the kids space where you're legally not allowed to do any of those things. So again, a lot of what we build, a lot of what we invest in, a lot of what we work with all of the big tech companies on are standards around how should this stuff be measured and what do you define as ROI and what do you define as viewability.
Are there kids ads organizations? I mean, maybe there are, and I don't know. Like, because there's the IAB here, there's the ANA, there's all the 4As. So, is that something that just doesn't exist that you think should, or do you participate in all of those organizations as well?
We have, I suppose in terms of our scale and how much we've been growing, we are now talking to all of those groups, and many of them have come directly to us because I think. Again, 5 years ago, the concept of kids digital and kids digital media was so small. Now it's absolutely huge and one of the fastest growing media verticals in the world. And I think all the groups and associations are realizing that, kids are a separate category that they have to take into consideration and that they cannot ignore. So we're actually having conversations with all of them right now. And I think they're properly realizing that, they have to have a kid strategy for almost every strand of their activity because it's very difficult to look at one particular place where it's not relevant. So, for example, with GDPR, everyone's got a GDPR strategy, but there needs to be a separate GDPR K strategy because almost all of these companies are either directly or indirectly interacting with kids and need to have a policy on it.
I know we're almost out of time here. So one other thing that I hadn't asked, which is, what about cross-platform use measurement? Kids are often doing, watching regular television or on-demand television, but using their phone and looking at websites or a YouTube video. So are you exploring the use of ACR to track what people are watching and then also tracking what they're watching on another device? Are you measuring that as well?
Again, you can't do cross-device tracking because of the data privacy laws. So it's certainly an area where we're looking at alternative solutions that we can actually build to provide some kind of data like that, back to content owners and back to brands. Really, you're sort of tackling that, with a lot of qualitative research in terms of how kids are spending time. So, you can certainly look in aggregate in terms of what devices are being used, but you can't really track down to the user that one specific user has used this particular tablet and this particular smartphone. And again, therein lie a lot of the technology challenges that need to be built and that we are tackling in the kid space, for advertisers and for content owners. So there's a lot of great questions here, and you can see it's kind of almost like going back in time, like 10 or 15 years in the mainstream digital media market, where everyone was wrestling with these general problems. We're just having to sort of go through that same cycle and invent all of these solutions for the kid space right now.
Speaking of technologies, are you looking into blockchain?
We have looked at blockchain, and blockchain is interesting, I suppose, because of its concepts of identity. It's still too soon, really, for the kid space. Again, I would say, ironically, the kid space is the closest thing to a lot of blockchain conversations, because fundamentally the kids media space is the biggest privacy-based media market in the world, because everything is based on.
It would be perfect for you. It would be a perfect.
Well, exactly, but my point is almost that we by virtue of having to build for the data privacy laws, we're building what blockchain is solving in other industries. It doesn't need to solve for the kid space, because we're already doing that anyway. Because it's all privacy by design, right? So it's really interesting. We're definitely kicking around a few areas on it, but again, the kid space, because it's the biggest privacy-based media market in the world, is really at the very forefront of privacy media in general. And I think that one of the things that is overlooked by almost everyone is probably how much can be learnt from what's going on in the kid space, in terms of data privacy and anonymity in general.
Well, that's why one of the reasons why we're excited to have you come to TVOT, TV of Tomorrow show, June 13th and 14th, to give ourselves a plug, and to have you meet all of the other companies who are, potentially good, could be good alliances for you. I think I did not ask you. Oh yeah, great. I think I didn't ask you about a specific example about something that you've done for a publisher or an advertiser, but we're a little out of time. Do you have a quick story of something that really showed you?
We have got many. If you look at our customers, they range from the likes of Disney to Cartoon Network to Hasbro to many big games developers. So I think it's all of these companies are investing furiously in building new apps and games and services and support for under 13s. So all of these big companies, even though they don't necessarily talk about it every day, they're working very closely with us to make sure that their services and apps, are completely compliant and are properly engaging with kids. So I can give many examples at the conference when we all get together.
Good idea. Well, and then I guess the next question: yes or no, VR? AR?
Interesting, but still pretty early. And all of the, again, we're definitely working with some companies in that space. A lot of what we do is kind of behind the scenes, before all of that kind of kicks in. So yes, it's definitely interesting, and we're definitely doing some stuff there, but it's all top secret right now.
Top secret. I knew that. Top secret. All right. Well, thank you so much, Dylan. I really appreciate your putting aside some time for us while you're elsewhere downtown in San Francisco at another conference about games. And we will be seeing you in June. But thanks so much.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And I'll see you very soon.
All right. Yeah, you can read all about SuperAwesome at superawesome.tv. And Dylan will, of course, be there in June. Thanks so much. This is Tracy Swedlow, Editor-in-Chief and co-producer of the TV of Tomorrow show. Hope we all see you there at tvotshow.com. Take care.